That's number one. Number two, at its very heart, portfolio management is about, and this was the work of Harry Markowitz. Harry Markowitz won the Nobel Prize in 1990 for his work on modern portfolio theory. So this is about stocks and shares. And, surprise, surprise, you say, well, isn't this obvious? Well, it wasn't obvious till Markowitz did the research. That when you make your investment, you don't consider the potential return of the share. You need to consider the risk, not the risk to the company, but the risk that the return won't be realized. Yeah. Because when you get a business case, usually it says, you get NPV of, I don't know, 50,000. You get an NPV of 50,000. So all other things being equal, if you've got nothing else to do, you invest the money to get the 50,000. NPV, according to modern portfolio theory, is, I'm an accountant, it's my weapon of choice. But the problem is, it doesn't consider risk. You need to consider how likely is it that we're going to get that 50,000. So whether we call it return and risk and return, or whether we call it attractiveness and achievability, or viability and visibility, or desirability and deliverability, it's the same thing. These twin aspects where the return is the benefits take away the cost. So what we have is costs, benefits, and risk. And yet, in most business cases, it's just cost and benefits. So we need, there's the Mike Cypher quote. So we have to prioritize. And in doing so, we need to consider not just the return, but the risk. And therefore, it means we can't, you say, well, how the hell would we measure the risk of the project succeeding? Well, one model is the DICE model here from Boston Consulting Group. So that's Harvard. And according to their research, the kind of five factors that, or four, but it's really five factors that influence the success or failure of a project or program are its duration, but not in the sense of long projects or short projects, in the sense of the duration between independent review, between it being scrutinized. There's the team performance integrity. They don't mean are you nice people and are you honest? Forget the word integrity. Just team. What they're saying is, if you look at Flupier's 11 heuristics in his book, How Big Things Get Done, Economist Book of the Year 2023, Ben Flupier, professor at Oxford, has these 11 heuristics. His first and second one are the first one is hire a master builder. So if you're putting in like a high-speed rail, make sure you hire someone who's put in high-speed rail before. But also make sure they have the team that's delivered projects of this complexity before. And that's what is included under that performance integrity. Then they talk about the C is commitment, but there are two C's, senior management and local. But why would senior management be interested if you can't demonstrate the benefits and therefore didn't demonstrate your strategic contribution and the effort? Apologies. You plug your data into that. You can find it online. Reasons I like it, it's research-based. It's Harvard. So if you use it and anyone says to you, oh, no, I disagree. Really? Go and argue with Harvard. It's you or Harvard? Okay. You get a win, worry, woe rating, and then there's a debate. You can have a debate about how do we move the project from the woe to the win, to the worry, to the win category. So just a way of considering, but I say we need to consider not just the return, but also the risk. Thirdly, we need to, and this is something that's often forgotten. People will often say, we've got a portfolio, and we're going to treat. I saw someone recently. Someone said, do we use the same criteria for all projects? And the reply was, oh, absolutely, because otherwise you wouldn't have a level playing field. You have to use the same criteria. Well, you haven't given it any thought. Geez, no, you don't. And this is Bob Cooper calls these categories. You can either call them categories, they can be called segments. So you're breaking your portfolio up. This is an example for investment drivers. This is what I use. What's the fundamental investment driver? Cooper calls them strategic buckets. In other words, you don't have one portfolio, you break it up into sub-portfolios. And he says, the first strategic decision is, how much money are we going to put into each bucket? Because people then say, how would you compare? How do you compare a cost reduction with a project to, upgrade your current payroll system? Well, you don't. All the mandatory stuff goes into a mandatory bucket. The financially motivated projects, increasing revenue or reducing costs, go into the relevant buckets, and they compete with each other. And obviously then you have the big bucket, strategic contribution, and that will probably, if you have more than one strategic objective, more than one sub bucket. How much money do we want to put into this particular strategic objective? And then the decision is, okay, how can we allocate that money in the most cost effective manner to achieve our objective? So, but you say, Steve, you're forgetting what you just said. Absolutely. So cost benefit analysis, NPV. Yeah, we want to know that if it's a financially motivated project, but we also want to know, is it achievable? So whether we're reducing costs or increasing revenue, yeah, we should use cost benefit analysis and achievable. So net present value, but is it achievable? If it's mandatory, it doesn't matter what the benefits are, because the benefits are associated with, you've got a legal requirement. If you choose not to comply with the law, John Thorpe said, it's quite simple. Your execs are going to prison. So, how do you measure? I remember my boss in the prison service at one point said, we were looking at the risk register, and he said, I don't see anything here about, the risk of me getting ill as the finance director. And I said, Julian, for some of us, that's an opportunity, not a risk. He wasn't pleased with me. Anyway, so what matters is, if we have to do it, if it is really mandatory, what matters is this the most cost-effective way of doing the mandatory, what we have to do? Because otherwise, the whole budget just gets soaked up. When I spoke to the guys in HMRC, and I forget the guy's name now, but he was saying to me, I think when they first adopted portfolio management, about 90% of their spend was on the mandatory stuff. And I said, well, that's got to stop. We've got to find better ways of managing the spend. And so they were able then to manage the ratio between discretionary spend and mandatory spend to have a more money available for the value adding areas. And the strategic contribution, we need to have some assessment of strategic bang for our buck. If you're investing to improve health outcomes, presumably the NHS will have measures of health outcomes. And then it's, okay, well, how much impact will this project make, given the spend, given the amount of money and effort we're putting in, how much bang do we get? How much impact on our objectives do we get? And those that give greatest bang for the buck should be obviously prioritized for funding, subject to their achievability. So it's getting this balance, and it has to be a balance between risk and return. So that's the third thing. Fourthly,